Hey there, music maker. After watching that intro, you might already be asking yourself, how do I get that floating sustained sound in my own fiddle tune playing? Well, if so, you are in luck today, my friend, because we are going to be looking at an intermediate advanced arrangement of one of my favorite fiddle tunes, Over the Waterfall. So if you've never heard the tune Over the Waterfall before, this has kind of become a standard in recent years. It's a great D tune, and it's attributed to the fiddler Henry Reed from Virginia, and was kind of passed along through the years by the historian and fiddler Alan Jabbour. And we're going to be using this tune to kind of unpack what I like to call the Kenny Smith floating technique. Now, if you're not familiar with the amazing flat pick guitar player Kenny Smith, pause this video, go to that search bar at the top of your page, and type in Kenny Smith guitar. He's got his own great YouTube channel. Kenny's become a friend of mine over the last few years, and I've always been a huge fan of his guitar playing ever since I was a little kid. One of his signature techniques is what I like to call this floating style. And really what we're talking about is allowing adjacent strings to ring as you're playing a note on another string. Let me give you an example real quick before we dive in. That first version of the lick that I played has a really ringing, sustaining, floating, water-like quality to it. That's why we call it the floating technique, right? And that second example was more like what you hear in traditional flat pick guitar fiddle tune playing. Kind of like short articulated notes. Maybe not short articulated notes, but at least notes that don't overlap on one another. Now, how do we achieve this floating technique? If you were looking real close, one of the signature elements of the floating technique is taking a note that would normally be played on a high string in first position within the first 3 or 4 frets and moving that up to a lower string in a higher position. So let me demonstrate that real quick. So if we take that lick that I was looking at a minute ago, all I'm talking about here is instead of playing so that's, if we name the notes there, that's G, F, E, D, C, B, A, F sharp, G. But what if we take this F that I'm playing on the first fret here and play it as that F on the B string, the 6th fret? You can already see where I'm headed with this technique. So instead of playing a line on one string, what this allows me to do is dip down to that next string and play that E note as it sustains over that F note. And then you just kind of try and figure out as many spots that you can do that as possible. All right, now that we've kind of got the principles of this floating technique out of the way, let's go ahead and look at how this applies to the tune Over the Waterfall. First things first, if you don't know the tune Over the Waterfall, I would highly suggest learning the basic arrangement that I have here on my YouTube channel. There's going to be a card up here in the corner of the screen that you can check out if you want to click out of this one and take a look at that basic melody first. We're not going to be covering that here today. So what I've done inside of this arrangement is take Over the Waterfall and do exactly what I just described with that simple lick in G there. Only Over the Waterfall is in D, and I've got my guitar tuned to drop D so we can get some more opportunities for sustained ringing lower notes here. Before we go any further in describing how this technique applies to Over the Waterfall, let's take a look at the arrangement in its entirety, and then we'll go back and start to break it down piece by piece. All right, my friend, there you have it, the kind of floating arrangement that I've come up with for Over the Waterfall. And one thing that you'll notice right away, just like I talked about with that floating technique at the beginning, most of the playing that I'm doing for the melody is happening in 7th position, up around the 7th fret on the guitar, which means that we have opportunities to play some of those regular melody notes on lower strings and then utilize the open B and the open E string to sustain over some of the melody notes and get that ringing quality. So now let's go ahead and kind of break this tune down piece by piece, and I'll show you how to play each kind of lick by itself, or at least some of the main ones that might give you a little bit of trouble. Okay, my friend, so the first thing that we're going to do here is learn the first measure. To me, this is kind of a weird way to phrase this tune if you're used to playing that simple melody rendition that I have, because we're in, you know, what I would call like first position or open position most of the time. And that sounds fine by itself, but check this out. And that's where the magic really comes in with those open strings. So let's break that down. So we're leading into that melody with the D note on the G string up here, and we're doubling it with an open D string just to give a little more kind of depth to the sound. And then doing a whole slide up from that 9th fret there into the F sharp. And because we've got D, A, D right there, and we're on a D chord, that just adds like a good bit of accompaniment and mass to the tune right there. And there's our first float. So we're doing a pull off from 10 to 8, an 11 on G, and then your right hand goes straight back up to that open E string. And then we have to shift down to get the second measure of this phrase. Then doing a slide from 6 into 7 on the G. And then kind of back into a similar phrase. And then here's where things get a little interesting. So we're kind of playing that open G on top of those notes right there to play us into the turnaround. One more time. So there you have it, my friend, the mechanics behind some of those floating phrases in the A part. Now on the B part, we don't use so much floating as we do just what I like to call self-accompaniment with lower strings, like that open D string. You know, we are in drop D here, so we can kind of utilize some of those open strings to our advantage and get a little more breadth and mass out of the tune on this one. Now that you have some of those mechanics underneath your fingers, by the way, I'm going to put up a medium tempo version of the tune right now with some tab on the screen so that you can follow along at a reasonable pace. But if this is too quick for you, don't worry. Just watch and follow along on the tab and see if you can kind of connect my finger movements with what you see on the screen. Then I'm going to cue up another version of this that's a little bit slower that you might be able to follow along with yourself, okay? There's a lot of weird left-hand positioning in this one, which is kind of one of the drawbacks of this floating technique. You have to do some things that are kind of unnatural on the guitar, to be quite honest. So just follow along, take it one step at a time, and you'll get it, I know. Here's that kind of medium tempo rendition of Over the Waterfall with the floating melody. All right, my friend, there you have it, the medium tempo rendition. Like I said, if that was a little too fast for you, this next version is for you. And even if this one's a little too fast, don't hesitate to use that gear icon below and slow the speed of the video down. That's one of my favorite features here in these video players now, and I think it can really be a valuable tool, especially if you're just getting into this floating style, or maybe you're kind of like a beginner intermediate or an advanced beginner who's trying to learn this one. So let's go ahead and dive into that slow rendition of Over the Waterfall Floating Melody. All right, there you have it, my friend. That is it for Over the Waterfall Floating Melody. Before I get out of here, I just want to say a huge thanks to my pal Kenny Smith for being such an inspiration on this style. Once again, if you haven't checked him out, definitely go check out Kenny Smith Guitar here on YouTube. He's got a lot of great lessons himself, and he's really kind of a legend in the flat pick acoustic guitar world, and we all owe him a lot, especially on this floating technique. Now, if you're wondering how this might be useful for you, say acoustic guitar is more of a hobby or something like that, a lot of chicken pickers and Telecaster players out there like Brent Mason, Johnny Hyland, Red Volkert, they all use this kind of floating technique, typically with hybrid picking in their right hand, but the left hand mechanics are still the same, playing those high notes on lower strings up the fingerboard and then utilizing some open strings. So this can be a great thing even for your country guitar playing. Okay, my friend, thank you so much for checking this video out. If you got a lot of value out of this lesson, go ahead and hit that like button and the subscribe button below. And if you want access to PDFs of the tablature and sheet music for all of the lessons, go ahead and check out the link below in the description to the Guitar Club. That's my premium membership service where I give all sorts of extra goodies like PDF downloads, backing tracks, and extended cuts of all the lessons here. If you're interested in learning a low octave melody of this tune in that drop D tuning, then definitely sign up for the Guitar Club below and you'll get that as kind of a bonus. All right, my friend, thank you so much for checking this one out. We'll catch you in the next video.